Okay, Don, 1994, a long time ago. What do you remember about coaching that team and that journey to the Centennial Cup?
Well, it's really hard not to remember because there were so many things that I didn't think could happen, did. And obviously, the one that everybody remembers is the championship. And as a coach, being a coach, while you talk about success at the start of the year, and you try to measure it in terms of scholarships, player improvements, and championships. And I think there was such a doubt of, oh yeah, the coach is talking about the championship, so is every other coach, and it's not going to be there. But what I remember is once we won the province, those players, I just saw a sense of two things: a sense of maturity in them, like, oh, we can win something here that is very difficult to do and important for a whole bunch of reasons. And that's the point when they started to believe in themselves. And I saw such maturing in those players uh, in that time frame, from just being a player who, yeah, we're playing, we're having fun, we might win, to being focused on something that was achievable, both as individuals and as a team. And I saw that maturity, and as a coach, being one, it's such a sense of accomplishment on their part in terms of recognizing what they have a chance to grab here, and then having the drive and the ability to go do it. And I often have talked to players, those players, and years after, and that they echo the same thing, like, coach, you talked about winning a championship in September, and we didn't really believe ourselves until early spring. And I saw such maturity in those players as people, but mostly as players. And then that's the rewarding part. And, often, not often, but on occasion, I'll run into one of the players. Now they got 2 or 3 kids in tow, but the first thing they want to say to me is, hey, coach, remember when? Yeah. And they obviously remember, and I do too. But I don't think there's anything more rewarding than taking a team that's just in the hunt but not quite there, and watching them mature as a team and as individuals till they achieve something like a national championship. It's incredible.
You said early in the year we could win the championship. Do you say that to every team, or you just felt this was a special group?
You're talking like a coach now, and you're right. I don't say it to every team because I think the one thing you have to be with every team is honest. And if you start every September and say, okay, we're a championship team, it's, yeah, we've heard this before, coach. But sometimes you just recognize, number one, in the character of the players, their present athletic ability, and the potential. What can we achieve? And once we got going through our league, the Alberta Junior Hockey League, a couple times playing teams, I realized that, our best effort, we can be the best here. And if we're the best here, we're in the hunt in terms of all the other provinces. And it wasn't until early January that I think the players started to believe me, thinking, you know what, if we could beat St. Albert, who were a good team at that time, we could win something here. And the part that I really find rewarding was winning is obviously everything in their mind, but in order to do that, those players had to mature as players, and there was the result being a lot of scholarships awarded. So they got all the benefits of recognizing the opportunity and doing something with it. And as a coach, that's such a sense of satisfaction. The championship is wonderful, but everything else that came along with it, it's just a bonus. And it's a year that you can't forget as a coach.
I'm wondering if you, just generally speaking, could describe the character, the quality, the strengths of that team.
Well, obviously the strengths, you have to be somewhere on par with every other team. You're not in the hunt. But what won it for us was the character. At the start of the year, being a coach, you have some things to say, and you wonder if it's just going over their head or, they're not listening. But once we got to the point in the playoffs, it was more dialogue in terms of a conversation amongst everybody else rather than just a coach telling you what to do. So I saw such maturity in those players as we progressed in the playoffs. Like, what, coach, you're right. We could win something here. And along with it go the intangibles, like the opportunities for scholarships and whatever. And that's the carrot to help them play. But I think you have to have the character and the desire to win, not counting the scholarship. You're playing the game. And I saw such a growth in those young men. and they were rewarded with the championship. But it was so much fun to look back at September and see what you had, who's going to make the team, and hey, you can't do that at practice, and watching I call it the growing up. And then at the end of the year, when you walk into the dressing room in the middle of the game and you know they need something to be said to them, yet they're repeating what I wanted to tell them. They recognize what they had to do, from the course of the year, and they had the maturity to accept constructive criticism and then the drive to get something out of it. So, the old adage, people say character wins. But that's right. Character does win, and we were rewarded with that. And it's so rewarding even today when I won't, maybe often's a bit of an exaggeration now, but when I used to meet these kids who have kids of their own now, but they still, just the light comes on when they see you. Hey, coach, remember when we did this? And I realized just how meaningful it was to them. But there's an old adage, and as a coach, character wins. And that comes to such fulfillment when I see these players now, see what they're like as men, as parents, to see that when you went into the dressing room, you wanted the same thing I did. You wanted them to accept some constructive criticism and do something with it. And they did that, and they were rewarded with it. And that, as a coach, is so satisfying when the players, coach, you're right. If we do this, we think we're going to win. And then they go ahead and do it, and they win. I just found that sometimes when you're coaching, it's like, well, the coach is going to come in here and give us heck for this and that and the other thing. I found that once we got in the playoffs, those players were mature enough. They wanted to hear from me. Tell me, what can we do to have a better shot at winning this thing, coach? And they all listened, and we were rewarded. It's hard to describe unless you really experience it. As a coach, but to win something that would seem so intangible, because and just how the selection of teams is. We had a select out of Calgary, half of Calgary. We got to pick some players on the north side, but the competition you were with, all the teams that had, I think, more opportunities to develop and more ice time and all those things that we didn't have, just to see how they responded. It's such a fond memory, and the joy of holding the trophy is fun. But as a coach, the satisfaction of seeing how those players matured as individuals and as athletes, that's what coaching is. That's the reward for coaching,
I'm going to throw a word at you. You had captains and there's leaders, and you obviously were the leader that pushed the right buttons and you got through to them. But on the team, like I've heard coaches say that there's leaders in the dressing room.
Yeah.
For the people in that room that led by example, that spoke up at times, how many leaders did you have?
Well, I have to say this. At the start of the year, I had 2 or 3 leaders, and I would often single them out even in my conversation with the players and that, and they would get up to speak. But the reason we were so successful is because, and this may sound a little strange to some people, but they all became leaders. And when you get them all wanting the same thing, as hungry as they were and having the talent, in order to obtain that, I would often ask that question, who was your leaders? Well, they all led at the end. And it got to the point, with exception being, again, you're a coach, you couldn't put on maybe some players for a power play that you really needed, but they had a role to play. Maybe they were great penalty killers, and so they did their contribution. And when you get that mix out of 21 guys, then you've got a hockey club. And there's an old adage that you and I both know is character wins. And I have to say, when we finished the season, that went through my mind 100 times. Like that just proves. And someone said, yeah, that's a great saying. But when the things we went through, the young men that were playing through injuries, or maybe not playing on what they thought was the first line, and all those sort of things, that's character. They're accepting decisions made by me, the coach, and responding to it. So character wins, Wally. And I was blessed to have so many players ahead.
See, it's really interesting because the Canucks just won the cup again. and they have more talent than you have. Like, they're so skilled today.
Yeah.
And getting them all to pull on the rope like you got your team is more difficult today. And it was easier in our day to get them to pull the rope. But today with coaches, it's more of a challenge. And the hockey system today breeds stars. It breeds players who think they're better than they really are. They get too much ice time, and maybe undeservedly. They're not held accountable. And coaches are responsible for making sure they don't cross lines. They treat each other with respect.
I agree. But the one thing that you really need at the start is, whether if it's a Canuck team and there's owners or another team, the sponsors or the owners, if we want to call them that, they have to respect what the coach is doing. Initially, he's building a team and he's getting them all ice time and all opportunities to do what they do well and have some success. But sometimes what gets in the way is when you get the phone call from the parent says, last year in midget, my son's, he was on the first line and he was on the power play and everything. Well, why isn't he today? And with parents, I used to almost laugh that off, though I didn't find it funny, but it was another call. But I made a point, and I know you did as a coach too, sitting down with your athletes at the start of the year and explaining the nature of ice time, character win, what you have to do under duress, etc., etc. And the big thing is to get those players to believe in what you believe in as a coach. And there's nothing more satisfying when you win a championship or something. Those players come up and give you a big hug with tears in their eyes. You just can't imagine that, and that's our reward as coaches. Wally, we both gone through that, and
Well, I think, like you said, when you run into them today, you can feel the feeling of appreciation.
Yeah.
I call it love. You're a family, and you became a family, and went through heaven and hell to get there.
Yeah.
And that's what championships do. They sort of prove the idea of the importance of transmitting belief. I call it, that's sort of my job as a coach, is to make them believe and earn the roles they deserve, but everybody has to feel valued. And I've watched you coach for many years, and I didn't see you rely on this player and that player and double and triple shift them. And today, I think there's more allocation of minutes to better players, but the other players accept that. And that's the hard thing of coaching today is you've actually, the Canucks this year had 4 lines that all could play the power play. So obviously, the top 2 would be better on the power play.
Yeah.
And their biggest challenge, because of their talent, was playing defensively. And I know, talking to Brad, he had to handle players who were so used to being recognized and having the puck all the time. And he played defense, and he was an offensive defenseman, but he managed to get them to play defense. And I just told him, and I told people associated with the team, they said, well, we got to be better in our zone. I said, look, it doesn't matter. You're playing so well with the puck. You're going to have to win 7-5. You're not going to win 2-1. Do you remember the score of your final game?
I have to confess, I don't.
Was it a tight game? You pulled it out of the hat?
No, as I
Because I
remember.
know Jason Abramoff scored the winning goal, I heard.
Yes, he did. Abe did,
Yeah.
And that was in the third period, too, as I recall. And the one thing then, when you're in the final game, you've got a team right next to you you're playing against that have the same character guys and talent, or they wouldn't be there. And that's the beauty of playing. When you're playing in a tournament or something, you get some teams that maybe survive by intimidation or whatever. But when you get into the final, like we were, it's two good hockey teams, so you're allowed to play the game.
Yeah.
And when you win a game like that, you can't help but respect the guys you just beat, whether it's 2-1 or 5-4 or whatever. And that's the beauty of getting. Cause, very rarely, I think, does an intimidating team get to the final on sheer intimidation. And you've been in hockey for a long time. You see teams that try to do that, but to have two good hockey teams play hockey, you almost hate to see one of them lose. Obviously, you like to win yours, but and then the respect. It's something I always remember when we won a national championship. A coach comes over and he shakes my hand, puts his hand on my shoulder, and he says, you guys played a great game. And here he is. He's as unhappy as he can be, but he knows his guys played just as great. There was a 1-goal difference, And but it goes to the old adage that you and I always live with. I think that character wins, but what's forgotten is when you're playing hockey and you're being coached, you're developing character. Because some people, athletes, young kids, they don't know if they have it or not. They've never been in that position. So how do you handle that duress? How do you handle that opportunity? And it's only one thing that I can think of. It's character. And what really proves it, and I know to you too, is you might see a guy on the street today that you coached 20 years ago, and he's showing you that same respect he did then, and introducing you to his kids. And, it's a way of gratitude for what you did for him. And to me, that was probably the most satisfying thing I got out of coaching. Championships are wonderful, but seeing and I know no one can tell me any differently, that as coaches, we help those young men in terms of what they are as adults. They're playing in a structured environment. They're playing under duress. They're rewarded when they work extra hard. All the life skills that they're learning that you don't learn in school. And
at home sometimes.
And at home, but the hockey is it just brings, any sport I imagine, but it just brings out the potential in terms of character in those young men. And I think that's what keeps coaches in it. Just championships are great, but you can have a lot of success without having your name on a trophy. And it's just so rewarding. For you and I, again, we're preaching to the choir because that's all we did, and we loved it. And but the one thing you need too, and maybe not pertinent to what we're talking about, is you need whoever owns or runs or sponsors that hockey club. You need them to respect what you're trying to achieve. And we were blessed in the Northeast Athletic Association with the Ken Brackles of the world. He knew what we were trying to achieve, and then we were often successful. And without it, if I used to talk to some teams in the Alberta Junior Hockey League and their coaches between periods or something, they'd be in the hall lamenting something. They'd say, the owner's going to fire me today because we're 4-6, all this kind of stuff. But that's not why you're there at the end of the day. It isn't. And I guess I'm wearing my coaching hat when I say that. But I think, I know you're the same as we've been rewarded so many times just by seeing what players have done when they left us in terms of going to college or pro or whatever. And just what I think we help them do is develop the character and accept success, accept failure, accept duress from teammates and opposition, and maybe some coaches that went a little crazy and yelled at the dressing room like you should never have.
Kick the garbage can.
But those are life skills that those kids learn. And I don't know where else you can get them. I don't think you can get as personal at school even. You get a chance to play hockey. You're a teacher, but you're teaching those kids, and they're being who they are, and you're trying to direct them a little bit. And that's why I find, and I know you too, coaching so much fun, because we did it for a long time.
I find that era, our era of coaching in the Northeast, with the administration like Ken Brackle, and I think sort of a working class community, respect was really important. And I tell this story at coaching clinics about Ken Brackle. You and I ran conditioning camps. We had hockey school all day and had a staff work there. And then at night, he came and helped me with working with the pros and going to be pros. And those were great because you were a nuts and bolts coach. I was a little bit technical coach. And it's
With a
funny,
nice
and I
mix
talked
with
to
it.
Brad about the ability to work together. I would get carried away with the technical, and you would come up and say, "Oh, I think we need to do a little bag skate," and I let it.
Yeah.
And the players were really happy. If I'd run that ice alone, I wouldn't have been. I wouldn't have had anybody.
Neither would I.
No, no, but it was a great combination. Though.
Yeah.
I think after about 8 years, Ken's kids and all the Northeast kids came through that school, and we did a good job developing the fundamental skills. The old ball hawk turn and the tight turn and those kind
Yeah,
of things.
yeah, eye up where you're
And-
going.
And Howie Meeker was sort of the foundation of the whole thing. But Ken came and asked me to coach the Bantam team. He couldn't because the year before he won the city championship with the Pee-wees. I think he had the Forest Heights team, and they beat Marlboro Park in the city final done. And he said, "Can you coach the Northeast team next year?" Well, they had the two best teams in the city playing the final. I said, "I'll do it." So I did. And I mean, I was an experienced coach. I could teach. And I was in fourth place early November. And I was frustrated. I ran great practices.
Yeah.
The kids worked hard. They did everything that I wanted. And I went and saw Ken. I said, "Ken, what the heck did you do? I don't know what to do. I'm doing everything." And he said, "Well, Wally, I didn't know a lot about hockey, but I got hit in the head with a puck at the bubble. And it was cold. Got cut open. It was early in the year. And I asked the players, "Do you really want to practice, you guys?" They said, "No." I said, "Well, I'm going to arrange about 70 games." And I think he had got about 60 games. They didn't have many practices. But he demanded two things: effort and respect. And those two words, your team that won 94 had effort and respect for each other, for the opponent, for the officials. And that's what's missing in hockey organizations today. They don't look at the life skills that you're developing by playing a sport. It's all about the glory of being better than the next guy.
Yeah. Leading scorer in first place. Yeah, you're right.
And they lose the perspective of what sport's for and what sport's about.
No, you're right.
And that's something you and I have never lost.
No.
We sort of coach a right win. It's almost like, well, we're too old, we're out of it now. But the things we're talking about still have application. And today's generation has changed. Parents are protecting their kids, they're putting them into programs, and no criticism of it. They want them to be the best they can be. But they're forgetting that you're going to earn it. You have to pay a price, and you have to be responsible.
Yeah, and the one thing that I know you and I both did, we always had that parent-coacher meeting. And that's when I think, as coaches, you have to be candid, and explain that we and I are just talking about what you're going to achieve and how you expect the parent to react to it. Because the last thing you want is you're sitting a kid or you're playing him with somebody else or a different position, and when he gets home and he gets in the car and dad starts giving the coach heck because why didn't he have you on the first line with so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. The coach has to have the support of the parent. And they got to know that right off the bat, because if they were coaches, then they wouldn't be that parent there, and it's like going, Walter, you've had the benefit of both. So you go to school, and you as a teacher are trying to put something across to some students, and the parents tell them, no, that teacher's crazy, you can't do it. And they need that support, and I think it's imperative that coaches starting out convey that message to the parents, because we always had the parent meeting before the season started and said, this is what I want to achieve, whether it's championships or scholarships or character builders, all of the above. But you as parents, you have to have give me the support, or I can't achieve that. And it may contradict some things that you're thinking, because, well, last year when Tommy was Bantam, he was on the first line. How come he's on the second line tonight? You know, you and I have heard that so often. It's sickening, but that is the critical thing, I think. If I'm passing messages on to parents, you cannot contradict the coach. If you've got a problem and you don't understand what the coach is doing, talk to him personally and ask him, but not involving your son. Yeah, you know, and that's one of the critical things, Wally.
Yeah, it's something you and I can do. We don't mind talking to parents, but most coaches are afraid.
Yeah.
And so stuff goes on behind their backs, and the manager sort of has to be the buffer.
Yeah.
And he'll let you know when you're sort of back and forth.
Yeah, but that just
and you've lost the team.
That just creates strife.
Yeah. And
that's all it does.
That's sort of what exists right now. And I'm going to share an example working with a U15 team just 2 years ago. It was Bantam age girls, elite, best girls in the age group. Very knowledgeable coach, our age. More experience than you or me around the world coaching. And he had a great plan, great practices, played everybody in all situations the first half. And he gradually was morphing it, but he didn't tell them. He just played everybody. And I thought everything was going well. So he had his Christmas meeting, and the parents put together a 3-page email telling him what he needed to do different. And I was shocked. I'm a paid mentor. And I sat there and said, are you kidding me? The power play, the diesel, they don't know, the parents put this collective email together. And 2 years ago, and I'm saying, oh my goodness, what chance does the coach have today? So when you coached, you didn't have a Canucks parent even, did you? No. But when you coached minor hockey teams, you had parents.
But I shouldn't say no. At the start of the year, after my first year coaching junior, I had a meeting with the players' parents, but there was probably still 25, 26 kids on the team. And I just give a brief explanation of college scholarship opportunities, what we were trying to achieve. You throw in some ice time and a little bit of stuff like that, and that's what I did. But try to avoid getting to the point where you and the parent are coaching this kid. It's you, and he has to learn. And I used to use the analogy, well, if your young man 3 years from now goes out and gets a job, he's answering to that guy, that foreman or that owner or whatever, okay? And he has to do what is required there for everybody's benefit. So let's do the same thing in hockey. I know, I've been in hockey for 25 years, I say to the parents, I know what has to be done in order for him to attract a scholarship or just be successful as an athlete or develop as a person. I've been there. You haven't. You're learning just like him. I want from you your support. And if there's something that you see that made that boy really different, when he comes home and he's just, he's pouting, he's not happy, he's this, then I don't have a problem with you phoning and we'll find out why. But then on the other side, Wally, I talk to the players. If you're not happy with ice time or something the coach has said, don't run to your mom and dad. Talk to the guy who is responsible for that, and that's me. And come and chat, and we'll talk it through, and we'll make it work, okay? Wally, when I look back, as much as those frustrations are when you get parents and that, I love the whole thing, because as a coach, without sounding arrogant, you're right. You've been there 100 times, right? So you saw that kid maybe not play well for whatever reasons or not press any of the above. And you've seen it, but that parent had never seen it before. It's his first time. How good a hockey player were you the first time on the ice? You weren't that good. And you're the coach, And
see, Don, you and I, we've coached. He had the Canucks for 30 years. You coached for 50, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mine's similar. And we didn't know what we were doing when we started.
No.
And so we made a lot of mistakes on the way, but fortunately, we seemed to adjust. We didn't we didn't get frustrated and quit.
And I think the two reasons are just what you alluded to. You didn't get frustrated and quit, but we had people that owned the team or ran the team that let us be coaches and learn from coaching. And if you measured your initial coaching only in wins and losses, then you wouldn't be successful. You know, Ken Brackett used to agree with you and me all the time. What are our priorities here to help them become better players, better people? And it's more than just putting the puck in the net, Wally. You know, and that's the part that I think is, you know, oh, you're coaching the puck. What's your record? And that's fine. That's a normal question. But sometimes I'd like to say, well, my record this year is 3 kids got NCAA scholarships. 2 kids are playing way better than they ever did. And I got a kid on the team that shouldn't be here, but now he's playing. Those are you got to define success.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, this is a line from a famous coach, John Wooden, coached basketball. He won like 18 national championships. He was an educator and a life skills coach, but he had success. And I think after his 15th championship, the reporter asked him, "What do you think of your team?" And he said, "Ask me in 20 years.
Then it'll be my team."
Yeah. But you'll see what they're like.
Yeah.
You'll see how they developed, how they treat other people, how hard they work, how they go the ups and downs of the job and the economy, and how they can raise kids and go through having cancer or a heart attack in the family. It teaches you to live your life better and knowing there's no free meal.
No.
And I think I'm really glad I got the end of that story. We've been talking for 32 minutes, and I'm going to shut off the recording now. Okay, Don. 1994, a long time ago. What do you remember about coaching that team and that journey to the Centennial Cup?
Well, it's really hard not to remember because there were so many things that I didn't